I mean, from our previous videos, we actually know it was the Annunaki. So I don't even know why we're asking this thing. Why is it called the Younger Dryas?
Because of the Dryas flower.
Yeah.
And I think
there's an older Dryas flower and a younger Dryas flower.
Okay.
So this Younger Dryas apparently went extinct during this period and then reappeared just after it. So during this period, the Younger Dryas flower disappeared, and after this event, it came back. So
okay.
It's simple as that. They named it after a flower. Oh, pretty. Hey, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and it really just helps. So
it's amazing to think, isn't it, at 12,800 years ago that most of North America was covered by a glacial ice sheet that was about, well, around the Carlsons is about 2 miles thickness in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where there's cities now. So you're talking New York, Chicago.
Well, we had
that
ice
sort of
shelves,
ice sheet.
This far south. I mean, we've got in the Shropshire Hills. There was, which is only a few miles from us, and we're it's sort of the middle of England. You still see we see evidence of glaciers and glaciation. You know, you can walk up the valleys that were caused by glaciation. So,
yes. Nature is very, very powerful.
Yeah, there are other scientists. I mean, there are arguments about this, of course. There's a William Napier did talk about possibly an airburst, like the Tunguska event.
Yeah.
So when a meteorite hits our atmosphere, sometimes our atmosphere is like water. If you can think of it like that sort of thing. When an object hits, there's massive friction, and sometimes if it hits at the right angle or whatever, you get an airburst where they just explode in the high up. So you don't really get an impact crater at all.
No, I think it's to do with the angle with which it hits. It's coming in from and hits
and
the
depends
atmosphere.
what object it is, what speed, it's all sort of
and velocity is another big one. Yeah.
And then when you get these big air bursts, I mean, the Tunguska event, what is it? It would blow down like 2 million trees or something. If that had happened over a city,
like 2 million square miles.
Yeah, now that would be really big. 2
No,
million square miles.
No, it's not that big.
I'm sure it was like something like 2 million trees it knocked down. But
was it 20,000 square miles?
It was something like that. It was massive,
something in that sort of.
We were very lucky it hit an unpopulated area. I don't think there's like 3 people die or something silly. There's like one bloke in a cabin in the middle of nowhere who they think died. Other than that, there were no deaths.
Might have been just 2,000 square miles. There's still the epicenter of the Tunguska impact is still completely flat grassland where no trees, nothing grows. It's just very simple grass vegetation.
I'd love to know then.
Nothing can grow in that point anymore for some reason.
We'll definitely look into that when it comes up.
Yeah.
But so William Napier argues that there's no impact crater because possibly something bigger than over Tunguska, maybe it airburst. And I can understand that as well, because if something airburst, this is why we airburst nuclear weapons. When we fire a nuclear weapon, we don't hit the ground with it and explode. They're designed to explode in the air because there's more devastation that way. More of the energy impacts the ground, sort of thing, rather than it being absorbed by the ground. So if you had a very large object airburst, all that energy would be spread out, and it would potentially melt the ice very quickly, cause fires thousands of miles away. This is possible. Dr. Bosbur, I'm going to go Bosbur. He argues that the math doesn't make sense for that. And if it was that big, it wouldn't airburst. It would come through our atmosphere like a hot knife through butter sort of thing.
I think I'll probably tend to go with Dr. Bosborough on this one.
Yeah.
I think if it's too large in size, it also depends on density as well. It's not just the size of the object, the momentum it has.
And you also assume it's only one object. Sometimes these things break up, and it's more than they could hit us 3 or 4 like a shotgun. We could have several objects hit us all at once. So they could be airbursts and not a large impact.
Yeah, of course. One could hit the sea, one could hit land.
Yeah, there's no reason to think that it's just one impact.
There is one thing I do really like in that Randall Carlson discusses, where he ventures around the eastern coast of America, and he was showing Graham various features in the landscape that he says are evidence of a very traumatic experience North America went through in the recent past in this Younger Dryas period.
That's Graham Hancock, isn't it? He talks a lot. He appears on Joe Rogan a lot with Randall Carlson, doesn't he?
He does, yes.
A firm believer in that this event was almost like a reset for humanity, doesn't he? And
yeah, he does believe that, and I think Randall Carlson provides a lot of evidence to back up Graham Hancock's theory.
Yeah.
In particular, the thing I was going to mention was with regard to how you get ripples by the side of a river or a stream where water flows, and you get little peaks and troughs. And if you've got a couple of feet of water, you might get a centimetre of amplitude on the peaks and troughs of the pattern the river and the water flow lays in the sediment at the side.
Yeah.
Well, Randall Carlson shows that on the eastern states of America, that there are ripples in hills that have amplitude of 50 feet.
So that's a lot
which
of water.
Is showing that a lot of water flowed through.
Suddenly as well. Yeah.
Which this is where I think that he's really starting to provide some evidence for there being an asteroid impact that hit the North American ice sheet that caused the rapid melt, and then that meltwater going back to the sea has shaped the American landscape. Also explain why we have very few tales of any North American cultures or civilizations existing. In the last 10,000 years.
This Clovis people, I mean, there is evidence to suggest they actually tried to migrate south, but around 9,000 years ago they died out anyway, and there's no understanding of why that happened. But unless, well, I would say it's bloody obvious that there was massive climate variation and
massive extinction of the megafauna. 75% of the large mammals in America disappeared. It's probably the food source of that people disappeared.
Yeah, and it would have took a long time to recover. Now, this Clovis extinction event. There's argument about that in mainstream science, and genuinely, I actually think the argument here is borderline funny. That they argue that as humans and the Clovis people migrated through Greenland into North America, and we just went on a mass killing spree and just slaughtered everything in our path. I mean, we got a bloodlust for for a couple hundred years, and we made the mammoth extinct virtually on our own. There is pockets of mammoths, I think, for much later. Which I think the change of environment and warming would have finished them off, but yeah, I mean, there's images of like mammoth graveyards with literally hundreds of skeletons and things, and we went on a killing spree, and that is the mainstream theory.
Yeah,
that we slaughtered everything in our path.
I don't buy it, to be honest. I think it's clutching at straws.
Mammoths are quite big. We didn't go on they're not puddy cats.
No,
we didn't go on a mass puddy cat killing spree. We could have done that.
We might have killed some of them, and we might have eaten some of them and used them as a food source. I believe that, but I don't think we would have had. Well, supposedly humans, we didn't have enough numbers coming out of the last ice age.
We also didn't have elephant guns.
Well, we had spears. We didn't have the technology that we now have for killing larger animals. And also, I think that they think that the woolly mammoth population far surpassed the human population at this point in history.
Yep.
So
how hungry were we?
I
mean, even today, we still drag up bones and tusks of woolly mammoths from the North Sea. When they're fishing in the North Sea, fishermen are constantly dragging up these bones, and they have to send them back to the national. It happens all the time. It's littered with bones.
There are a lot of mammoths.
There were a lot of mammoths, and they're big. How hungry were we? But also, it was that we slaughtered everything else as well. We just no. This is a theory that literally makes no sense.
You don't see people killing elephants in Africa or Asia today, do you, for food very frequently?
No, and they got they're not, I mean, it's a good food source. Don't get me wrong, but it's a very dangerous food source to go after. They're big,
which is why we don't go after it today.
Yeah.
Also, they're endangered. That probably does also make a difference in the fact that we're not legally allowed to.
We're idiots. We like the tusks. We don't eat the animal, do we? We cut the tusks off.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. A lot of some of the people that argue this, though, say, well, look what we did with the bison and in North America, and the buffalo. We virtually made them extinct. There was vast herds, and we just went on. It's a nonsense simile to make, though. It's a nonsense. There's no connection between those two things. For one, we had guns when we decided to destroy the buffalo.
Yeah, which kind of the technology made a big difference.
And there were political reasons why we were hunting them as well. And there was a money on the hide and things. And it was at a time when we were moving east across America, and there's stories about us that we partly did it to take out the Indians as we were trying to remove their food source. And there's political reasons anyway why we did that. But also, the big difference is we had guns. Which makes it a lot easier.
Yep, certainly does.
So no, I don't buy that in the slightest. There was a massive extinction level event, and I don't think humanity for once had anything to do with it. We were innocent. This once. This is the only time we're innocent when it comes to environmental disasters. Every other time we're totally guilty.
I think the buffalo or the bison also being the main food source of the Indians.
Native Americans, yeah.
Yeah, probably meant that they had part to do with the extinction of it as well as us.
But I think it was actually literally they were pretty good at like balancing it, and
they did have a much better balance with nature.
There's a story, I don't know how accurate it is, but there's a story that we wanted to damage the Native American tribes as much as we could, and one of the ways we could do that was remove the buffalo, which they considered to be, there was a spiritual element to it as well for them. So that's one story. I don't know how accurate it is. I think we just like the furs as well. We needed the furs, but because a lot of the time we didn't even eat the meat. We skinned them and just sold the furs. So you see images of just like vast fields of buffalo just with no skin on it. It's horrible. Humans are shit. We really are horrible.
We certainly can be.
But there are other theories of what could cause this. Now, I have a little theory. We're worried at the moment about climate change and there being what we call like a runaway greenhouse effect.
Ah, okay, yep.
So basically, our ice sheets are melting, which is however much carbon we release into the atmosphere, nature is far better at it. I was watching a thing about in Greenland, and there's this like thermo power station next to a volcano. So they squirt water into the ground, the volcano heats the water up, that comes back up as steam and drives the turbines. But they release quite a lot of CO2 from this power station. So they're trying to capture it. And there's this big process about how they basically carbonate water. So squirt the carbon into water, then squirt that into the ground. That dries, and then the carbon gets captured in the rock. So it's a really good way of capturing it. They capture about a third of the CO2 they release in a year, and that's about 100,000 tonnes of carbon. So that sounds great.
Yeah.
The volcano releases 1.7 million tonnes of carbon every year, and it's not active. When it's active, it's like far more than that. Yes. Nature releases loads of carbon, but also a lot of that carbon is then captured in our ice. So when the ice melts, carbon gets released. A lot of the climate change worry is that as our polar ice caps are melting, that's going to then release far more CO2 than anything we release, and we get this runaway. We could get a runaway effect.
Yeah, it's the same with the oceans. The oceans capture it as well, but as they heat up, they release some of the captured into the atmosphere. As the oceans cool, they will absorb some of the carbon from the atmosphere and put it back into the sea to perhaps be put down as sediment. You know,
as algae blooms things as well as algae absorbs a lot of CO2 in the oceans, and if you get large algae blooms, they absorb CO2. But then, depending on the climate, it affects their population. So there's lots of this natural effects going on. I wonder whether this could have actually been that the ice sheets were melting, we were coming out of the last ice age, and could have this blip been caused by a runaway greenhouse effect? They may not. I mean, it could have caused some sort of sudden. Now, I wonder if it's possible, but it seems too dramatic to me. It seems too. We're talking,
I don't know. I think. Do you not think the process would be it's a bit slower for a runaway greenhouse effect? Like
That's what I mean.
We've been pumping a lot of carbon into the atmosphere for 150 years.
Yeah.
And do you know what I mean?
I mean, like I say, the ice shelf can release far more CO2 than we can, but
Yes.
it doesn't. I don't think it explains. So yeah, this is only a theory. It's just something I thought about, but I don't really think it holds water, if I'm honest, because I don't think it explains the sudden sea level rises.
No. I tend to agree.
But I think it's something to consider and to look into. Maybe somebody much cleverer than me can look into it. There are other theories. There's a bloke called Charles Hopgood who's a big believer in sort of
Oh yes.
the slippage of the crust.
No, Earth crust displacement theory, wasn't it?
I mean, his book
mentioned it in that film 2012.
Yeah, it's a good film.
Where they make the theory, where they make him look like a nutter conspiracy theorist.
The neutrinos are excited. That's how the film starts. The neutrinos are excited, and that's what's causing the thing. They never mention neutrinos again in that movie.
No.
But if you watch the first couple of minutes, it's like, what's he on about? And then they never mention it again. But neutrinos.
They needed a word, didn't they, that most of the general population didn't understand as to why the land was falling in on itself.
Yeah. But this Charles Hopgood, he was around the 30s. He talked to, I mean, his book had a foreword by Einstein. So that gave a bit of,
Yeah, a bit of credibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I'd like my book forwarded by, Stephen Hawking or something. And anyway, the theory basically was that we didn't actually have an ice age. What we had was the ice. The North Pole was just in a different place. The crust had slipped. The North Pole, instead of being where it is today, was about 2,000 miles to the east. And basically, the North Pole was where North America is. And this explains why there actually wasn't ice in sort of like the Alaska regions in the last ice age, and the parts of the tundra in North Russia, where the ice didn't come down sort of in an even long latitude. It sort of, so he sort of said like that it had slipped.
Yeah, that the Earth's crust had moved on its axis of orbit, so that
and we know this happens a bit. We know it's happening today. The true North Pole just shift a bit. They're worrying about the North and South Pole are going to flip, aren't they? And we're not really sure how that's going to. And that we know that happens sometimes, and they're a bit worried about what's going to happen. Somebody was saying, our satellites will be confused. It's not the satellites. Our magnetic field is what protects us from the sun, and it's weakening. And they're talking about it flipping. I'd be more about what does the magnetic field
about the ultraviolet radiation and the lack of
Yeah.
protection from it in that period. Yes, my advice would be stay indoors. If the pole shifts,
sunscreen.
Just stay indoors. Just stay out of direct sunlight for a while.
I think we might have
years,
1,000 years maybe.
It depends how quick the poles shift and how quick the magnetic field would.
You ever see the RoboCop when they say there's RoboCop has little adverts during it, and somebody's like, new sunscreen 2000 is like putting a blue sludge on their heads to protect them from the. I can have hours in the sun. It's like covered in this blue crap. But that might be what we have to do. But so there's some credence to this theory. Him and Einstein argued about it, and basically Einstein told him it was nonsense eventually. But if crustal slip theory is true, though, when this would have slipped, Antarctica would have been much closer to the equator potentially,
with a much more temperate climate.
Could it have been a populated continent? Potentially.
Quite possibly, yeah.
And Antarctica sounds like Atlantis. The words are very similar. There's like 3 or 4 of the letters are like the same.
Not as similar as the Atlantic Ocean.